Good morning, Madam Senator, Madam President, sorry, and Senators, good morning. Today I want to focus on the precious gift of time. We are already in the third month of this year and are about to begin the Lenten season. But I want to challenge and encourage you to always make the most of every day and every opportunity, because once a day and a season has passed, it never returns. Proverbs 27:1 states, "Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring." Someone has said, time is the most valuable thing a man or woman can spend. As you move into the third month, what strategies will you employ to make the best use of each day? Leadership can can bring a lot of weight and the expectations of many. So as leaders, you must decide and determine what is the purpose for this season of your life, and how will you accomplish all the priorities and properly manage the expectations of others. Secondly, it is imperative that you be prepared to do what is required in the time that is allotted to you. Life is a precious gift that we must nurture and embrace. However, we must always remember that there have been others who've gone before, and there will others who will follow us. And so we must honor the sacrifices of the past and be determined to make the future brighter for those who come after us. Ephesians 5:15 and 16 states, "Be careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil." John Ron said, "Time is more valuable than money. You can get more money, but you cannot get more time." Thirdly, senators, always make it a daily focus to live your best life every day and to be the best version of yourself always. Sometimes you will only get one opportunity and one chance to meet a person, to fix a problem, or to impress a potential project partner. Be determined to seize every opportunity with both hands and with integrity. You never know how past events can impact present settings. Always pay kindness, respect, good stewardship forward. Galatians 6 and a part of verse 10 states, "So then as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone." And finally, make time this Lenten season to allow God to strengthen you for the future that is before you. Spiritual renewal allows each person to be positively transformed. Whomever you spend time with begins to reflect in your behavior and in your interactions with others. Set aside quiet time to pray. Set aside time for quiet time and to pray and to listen, because leaders need God's continued guidance and wisdom so they can navigate in an ever-changing Bahamas and a changing world. Remember, we are mortal beings created in God's image to do good works. So use each day as an opportunity to develop a positive and lasting legacy that will live long after you are gone. Colossians 3 and 23 states, "Whatever you do, work heartily as to the Lord and not for people." And finally, I conclude with this Arabian proverb. 4 things never come back: the spoken word, the sped arrow, time past, and neglected opportunities. May each of you make good use of the time that God has allotted to you, and may you live with excellence and wisdom. Amen. Let's pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for designing the marker of time that allows humanity to plan and to live their lives with purpose. Thank you for all that is past, and we look to you for all that is to come. Be present in the lives of all our senators, and may this Lenten season be a time of continued spiritual growth for them. Bless them in their going out and in their coming in, and may they grow more and more like you. We pray your protection upon their families and all their endeavors. And Lord, we pray that you will bless our Bahama land. May peace reign supremely for all. We pray all these things in the precious name of Jesus. Amen. Please join in the prayer of our Lord. Our Father, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning, Senators. Today is the 3rd of March, morning session, adoption of minutes.
Madam President, morning, I move that the minutes of the meeting of the Senate held on Monday, 10th of February 2025 be adopted.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the minutes of the Senate of the 10th of February 2025 be adopted. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order the minutes of the 10th of February 2025 be adopted. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign, swearing in of new senators, communications by the President. Madam Chaplain, we offer great appreciation to you for your time and effort and for reminding us this morning of the precious gift of time. It is with a heavy heart that the Chair offers sincere condolences to the entire family of my dear and cherished friend, Attorney Kelly Ingram, daughter of former Prime Minister Hubert Ingram and Mrs. Dolores Ingram. The transition of Kelly remains difficult to comprehend. I first met Kelly at Inns of Court School of Law in London, England, during the fall of 2004. We met as proud citizens of the 242 and became fast friends as we navigated the rigorous studies of the bar vocational course. Beyond matriculation at the bar, Kelly and I bonded over stories and conversations relating to family, politics, religion, woman equality, and a better Bahamas. We also bonded because she was my hairdresser in England. Our love and friendship transcended political boundaries and denominational affiliations. Armed with an infectious and quick smile, calm personality, and pure heart, Kelly befriended Bahamian, Caribbean, and international students with ease. It was always a pleasure to see her with that signature warm greeting of "what you saying?" And she actually waited on a response each time. We successfully completed the bar vocational course and was called to the bar and returned home to work, where our friendship continued and blossomed. Kelly had a first-class legal brain and was committed to integrity, honesty, and the highest ethical code of conduct while practicing law. She was happy to share her knowledge, insight, and understanding of the law with her peers and junior lawyers. She demonstrated an unwavering commitment and dedication to the Bahamas Bar Council and generously gave of her time and talent. On the politics and government front, she was razor-sharp, perceptive, and visionary. She was passionate about general elections and was a relentless advocate in the polling stations on election day. On those days, she was gutsy and snappy. It mattered not which administration was in power. Kelly remained humble, gracious, considerate, and respectful, qualities that I greatly admire. During the vicissitudes of real life, I found her to be a wonderful friend who was consistently kind-hearted, good-natured, empathetic, and noble. She was a source of light, compassion, and sound advice. She immensely loved her parents, siblings, aunts, nieces, and nephews, cousins, and her wider family. They were all her rock, and she prided herself on showing up for them. Zig Ziglar's philosophy on leaving a legacy reminds us to leave a legacy that cannot be erased by making a difference in lives of others that will echo for generations to come. Thank you, Kelly Ingram, for leaving an indelible legacy of ethics at the bar, substantive love for God and family, laughter, friendship, and compassion, all of which will never be forgotten. I shall keep your beloved family in my prayers and remind them that Scripture affirms that weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. Psalms chapter 34, verse 18 reminds us that the Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. Kelly, you will be immensely missed. You made us all proud to be called woman. May you rest in peace and rise in glory. I now invite members of this upper chamber to pause for a moment of silence as we reflect on the life and times of Kelly Ingram. Thank you, members. The chair now invites Senator J.Ann Major from the government side, and she'll be followed by Senator Michael Barnett Ellis, and they will bring brief condolences. Senator, the Honorable J.Ann Major, can you please commence?
Madam President, Senators, good morning. I join Madam President and my fellow senators in extending my heartfelt condolences to Prime Minister Hubert Ingram and his wife Dolores on the passing of their daughter Kelly. I had the pleasure of meeting Kelly during my days as a bright-eyed summer student at Higgs & Johnson, and then later having her as a colleague during my early days as an associate of the firm. Over the years, while we were no longer colleagues, whenever we would cross paths, I was sure to be greeted by that bright Kelly smile. Madam President, death is never easy to face. No matter the circumstances, you can never really be prepared for it. But it is especially heartbreaking when it takes someone in the prime of their life with so much more living to do. On behalf of this administration and my fellow senators, I pray for comfort and strength for Kelly's parents, her siblings, her extended family, and her dear friends as they mourn this incredible loss and prepare to lay her to rest tomorrow. I pray that the love and memories that you all shared comfort you in the days ahead and bring you a peace that surpasses all understanding. Kelly, may you rest in peace and rise in glory and continue smiling on your loved ones left behind. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator J.Ann Major. Senator the Honorable Michael Barnett Ellis.
It is with a heavy heart that I rise in this honorable chamber. Last week, we received the heartbreaking news that Kelly Ingram, one of my dearest friends, left us far too soon. We're going to get through this. My condolences to her father, Prime Minister Hubert Ingram, her lovely mother, Mrs. Dolores Ingram, her siblings, her friends, and those of us who had the privilege of knowing her. Kelly and I were friends for over 20 years. I don't quite think we hit the 30-year mark. Our mothers, both educators, and our fathers, formidable men with larger-than-life personas. We were more alike than we were different. Kelly was a force of nature, bold, unapologetically authentic, and deeply loved by all who had the privilege of knowing her. She had a rare gift of bringing full-bodied laughter into any situation, offering unwavering support, and speaking truth with a candor that was both refreshing and unforgettable. Madam President, you referred to her standard greeting of, "What you saying?" But there was another three-letter phrase beginning with W that she also used very frequently. Her presence was magnetic, her wit unmatched, and her kindness immeasurable. This weekend I saw a post that said, "Who needs therapy when you have a 3-person chat group with the most unhinged name?" For me, that chat group was Kelly, Christy, and I, but I can't share the name of that group. Although she is gone, Christy and I can't bear deleting our chat group, and I still drop posts in there that apply to us. Kelly's life with us was far too short, but her impact will endure. Kelly left us with cherished memories, lasting friendships, a legacy of strength, humor, and authenticity. We mourn her loss, but we also celebrate the remarkable person that she was and the joy that she brought unto our lives. Her spirit will remain with us always, and I pray that she rests in peace, knowing that she was truly loved. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Michael O'Barnett. As always, it's a pleasure to have guests in the Senate gallery. And in particular today, we have future leaders in the gallery who would one day occupy these seats that we now occupy. As I call your name, can you please stand? And just by way of background, the majority of the persons in the gallery today are our youth senators. They were sworn in last year, October, and they will serve a 2-year stint as being youth senators of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I think that deserves a round of applause. The Attorney General, Senator Ryan Pinton, is admonishing us to behave today, and I'm sure he's going to lead by example. So in the Senate chamber today, we have Tizelle Lightburn, who is the Youth Senate President. And we have Tyrese Bunch, who is the clerk. Dr. Brandon Bethel. And Trey Bethel. Hannah Miller. Lauren Ashley. And Lashante Sampson. Did I omit any of the youth senators? Okay. The other two persons in the gallery are actually my family members. They're not youth senators. So I think that they're going to make me behave today. They are also very promising young people, but they asked that I not read their CVs, right? So we have with us today Dr. Shannon Butler, my nephew, and my beloved niece/daughter, Morgan Adderley. Thank you all for sharing your time with us today and coming to watch the proceedings live. I'm sure that your visit here would be insightful and productive, and you would learn some do's and don'ts, which we can discuss at another point. And I've also noted your interests, and I'll be speaking with the senators later because our youth senators have mentioned the names of some of you good senators whom they would like to pair up with as mentors. So we'll be discussing that. And so you'll be meeting them during the break if they are present, if those particular ones are present here today. And so, in closing, may God bless you, youth senators. May God bless my niece and nephew. May God bless you, senators, and your respective families. And may God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I hereby table the President's communication. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the House of Assembly.
Message from the House of Assembly.
Bahamas, number 34. Message to the Honorable the President and Honorable members of the Senate from the Speaker and representatives of the Honorable House of Assembly. The Honorable House of Assembly acquaints the Honorable the Senate that they have passed the following bills and desire the consent of the Honorable Chamber, namely, a bill for an act to constitute an independent commission to conduct investigations into allegations of participation in serious breaches of the law by members of the security forces and specified public officials, to provide the functions, powers, organization, and management of the Commission and for connected matters. A bill for an act to combat wrongdoing in the public and private sectors by encouraging, facilitating, and protecting disclosures made to an authority designated for the purposes of investigating and determining wrongdoing and for connected purposes. House of Assembly, Nassau, NP, the Bahamas, 19th February 2025, Speaker.
Laying of documents by ministers.
Madam President, I beg leave to lay on the table of the Senate copies of the following: the Banks and Trust Companies Regulations Act 2020, Payment of Dividends Regulations 2025, the Civil Aviation Space Flight and Reentry Regulations 2025, and the Consumer Protection Act 2023, Appointed Day Notice 2025.
Order documents be brought up. Order documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Yes, Madam President, I beg leave to lay on the table of the Senate copies of the following directions: the Public Debt Management, Bahamas Registered Stock 2027, 2029, 2031, 2034, 2044, and 2054 directions 2025, and the Public Debt Management, Bahamas Registered Stock 2027, 2029, 2031, 2034, 2044, and 2054 directions 2025.
Order documents be brought up. Order the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Madam President, I beg leave to lay on the table of the Senate copies of the National Insurance Board 2022 Annual Report charting the course. Also, Madam President, a copy of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas 2024-2025 Mid-Year Budget Statement presented to the Honorable House of Assembly, and a copy of the mid-year budget performance during the first 6 months ending 31st December 2024.
Order documents be brought up. Order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
None, Madam President.
Communications by ministers. Communications by senators. Questions. Answers to questions. Presentation of petitions. Appointment of select committees. Reports of committees. First reading of bills.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I beg leave to introduce and have read for first time a bill for an act to combat wrongdoing in the public and private sectors by encouraging, facilitating, and protecting disclosures made to an authority designated for the purpose of investigating and determining wrongdoing and for connected purposes.
Order the document be brought up. Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the following document be read for a first time and tabled. A bill for an act to combat wrongdoing in the public and private sectors by encouraging, facilitating, and protecting disclosures made by an authority designated for the purpose of investigating and determining wrongdoing and for connected purposes. As many as in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to combat wrongdoing in the public and private sectors by encouraging, facilitating, and protecting disclosures made to an authority designated for the purposes of investigation and determining wrongdoing and for connected purposes.
For the first reading of bills.
Madam President, I beg leave to introduce and have read for first time a bill for an act to amend the Defense Act.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the following document be read for a first time and tabled. A bill for an act to amend the Defense Act. As many as in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Defense Act.
For the first reading of bills.
Madam President, I beg leave to introduce and have read for first time a bill for an act to amend the Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute Act.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a first time and tabled. A bill for an act to amend the Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute. As many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute.
For the first reading of bills.
Madam President, I beg leave to introduce and have read for first time a bill for an act to amend the Value-Added Tax Act.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a first time and tabled. A bill for an act to amend the Value-Added Tax Act. As many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Value-Added Tax Act.
For the first reading of bills.
Yes, Madam President, I beg leave to introduce and have read for first time a bill for an act to amend the Domestic Minimum Top-Up Tax Act.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a first time and tabled. A bill for an act to amend the Domestic Minimum Top-Up Act. As many are in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Domestic Minimum Top-Up Tax Act.
For the first reading of bills,
Yes, Madam President, I beg leave to introduce and have read for first time a bill for an act to amend the Business License Act.
is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a first time and tabled. A bill for an act to amend the Business License Act. As many are in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Business License Act.
For the first reading of bills,
Yes, Madam President, I beg leave to introduce and have read for first time a bill for an act to amend the Road Traffic Act.
it is moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a first time and tabled. A bill for an act to amend the Road Traffic Act. As many are in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Road Traffic Act.
For the first reading of bills,
Madam President, we have had some bills that had been read previously, and they were on the agenda. They were on the agenda, and there were some amendments made in the House. And we laid them here, and there were some amendments made in the House, Madam President. And so what we would seek to do was to withdraw the bills that had previously been laid and replace them with bills that incorporate the amendments that were made in that other place. And so those bills are the Movable Property Security Interest Bill. We also have the movements that were made. The Movable Property Security Interest Bill, the Bankruptcy Amendment Bill, the Choses in Action Amendment Bill, the Cooperative Societies Amendment Bill, Money Lending Amendment Bill, the Stamp Amendment Bill, and the Bahamas Cooperative Credit Unions Amendment Bill. We have, yeah. There was a minor change, as the AG is saying. We have copies of the amended versions. I think we have copies that are ready for distribution, and so we're just seeking the concurrence of the side opposite to to withdraw and replace, and also to amend, to be able to debate today the protected disclosures bill that we introduced this morning.
is there a second? Do we have the Senator the Honorable Darren Henfield, do we have concurrence of the opposition? Thank you so much.
So thank you very much to the side opposite. And so we are withdrawing and replacing the Movable Property Securities Interest Bill, the Bankruptcy Amendment Bill, the Choses in Action Amendment Bill, the Cooperative Societies Amendment Bill, Money Laundering Amendment Bill, Bahamas Cooperative Credit Unions Amendment Bill. Yes. Replacing.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bills be withdrawn.
Okay, one additional one, Madam President, the Stamp Amendment Bill. Yes.
It's been moved and seconded that the following bills be withdrawn. Movable property security interests, withdrawn and replaced. Movable property security interest bill, Bankruptcy Amendment Bill 2024, Choices in Action Amendment Bill 2024, Cooperative Societies Amendment Bill 2024, Money Lending Amendment Bill 2024, the Bahamas Cooperative Credit Unions Amendment Bill 2024, and Stamped Amendment Bill 2024. As many as in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried.
Thank you,
For
Madam
the first
President.
reading of bills,
There are none, Madam President.
second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder.
Thank you so much, Madam President. Good morning.
Good morning.
Today I rise to move for the second reading of the Independent Commission of Investigations Bill 2025 and the Protected Disclosures Bill 2025 as a compendium. This legislation addresses the government's approach for anti-corruption measures and good governance. The government of the Bahamas takes allegations of corruption seriously, whether the allegations are against our security forces or any other government agency or official. We have a commitment to transparency and we have a commitment to good governance. We have worked, Madam President, to introduce legislation that will address the concerns of the people. The Independent Commission of Investigations Bill was released for widespread consultation. We have taken note of the feedback that we have received, and the bill we debate today incorporates the comments and the suggestions of the public at large that were received and accepted. We also debate today, as mentioned, the Protected Disclosures Bill 2025, which establishes a whistleblower protection framework. Whistleblowers, Madam President, are critical to the fight against corruption. Not only do they safeguard and sometimes help recover misused public funds, or private funds for that matter, but they also contribute to bringing about important policy-based reforms. Their actions raise awareness and help establish a public accountability and what I call an integrity culture. The bill sets out the framework of protections of disclosures and the regime that will govern the receipt of disclosures and the investigations of those disclosures. Madam President, our blueprint for change includes reforms which promote good governance, established on the principles of transparency, integrity, and accountability. These two bills are critical components of these commitments and to our anti-corruption strategy, and will work hand in hand with the Ombudsman Act, which we have previously passed into law in this place. The Ombudsman Act was passed in 2024 and provides the establishment of an Office of the Ombudsman, which will ensure that every public officer acts in accordance with its mandate and in compliance with fundamental freedoms of human rights. Madam President, collectively, this suite of legislation will combat corruption and wrongdoing in the public and private sectors. And I maintain, Madam President, that this suite of legislation is the most aggressive anti-corruption legislative agenda we have seen in my lifetime. Madam President, I turned 50 years old just a few months ago. And so that tells you the magnitude of the legislation that we debate today. You paused. I'm catching you up. With respect to the Independent Commission of Investigations Bill, Madam President, this bill recognizes the need to ensure that there is transparency and independence in investigation of incidents which allegedly involve serious breaches of criminal law that are specified in the bill by officers of security forces and by specified officials. So there's two sets of persons that this bill governs. Again, security forces and specified officials. The security forces, Madam President, that includes the police force, the defense force, the Department of Corrections, Customs and Excise Departments, the Immigration Department, and any other force or service that is specified by an act of Parliament. So if that is expanded by Parliament, this bill would likewise apply to them. The law applies to specified officials, Madam President, which includes parliamentarians, so we're all covered, senior public officers, heads and deputy heads of government corporations, general managers and deputy general managers of government corporations, chief and deputy chief magistrates, family island administrators, and other elected local government officials, directors and board members of government entities, Madam President, and any other class of public officers or public persons appointed by public bodies. This list, Madam President, was modeled from those who are obligated to file public disclosures under the Public Disclosure Act. This is a significant widening, Madam President, of the jurisdiction of the Independent Commission of Investigations from what was released initially for consultation. A significant broadening in scope. And that is as a result specifically of the consultation efforts we undertook and the feedback we received and how we approached this piece of legislation. The Independent Commission is comprised of 3 persons, 2 of whom should be qualified to hold high judicial office, and 1 who is a chartered accountant, so we can bring the technical skills of accountancy to these types of investigations. The commissioners are appointed by the Governor General on the recommendation of the Prime Minister after consultation with the Leader of the Opposition. And the Commission is empowered to receive complaints, investigate and hold hearings, inquire into complaints against officers of the security forces and specified officials, and to make recommendations to the Director of Public Prosecutions as to whether any criminal charges ought to be instituted. The Commission is further empowered to make such recommendations as the Commission deems necessary for the review and reform of relevant law and procedures applicable to security forces and public bodies. So they have an obligation to make suggestions to policy and law that will bring about better transparency and anti-corruption efforts. This ensures that the systems by which complaints are made are accessible to the public, and is further empowered to make recommendations for the review and reform of recruitment and the policies of recruitment, disciplinary procedures, and conditions of service. The Commission may employ 3 directors of complaints who will be lawyers, counsel of at least 5 years practice before the bar, and who are responsible for setting up the management schemes and the functioning of the Commission itself in up to 3 regions that would be specified. So I envision you might have 1 in charge of Nassau, maybe 1 in charge of Grand Bahama, and 1 in charge of the Family Islands, for example. The Commission may also employ investigators who are responsible for taking charge of any of the scenes of a crime, which are appropriate, and to collect the evidence, to interview the witnesses, to retain the records and documents that are certified by the Commission that are reasonably necessary to investigate the incident at hand. Complaints made to the Commission may be determined informally, where the preliminary investigation clearly indicates participation in an incident by a member of the security force or special official, specified official, or where the person's conduct, even if proven, does not justify a criminal charge. So there may be a complaint, and that complaint may be proven, but it doesn't rise to the level of criminality, and therefore the investigation ends. Alternatively, the complaint may be determined formally by a commission in a hearing presided over by the commissioners, who may determine the mode of the hearing depending on the seriousness of the incident and the national importance of the incident, and any public interest considerations that may exist, and the circumstances in which the incident is allegedly to have occurred, and shall form the opinion on any of the evidence presented. The hearings may be held in public or in private or, Madam President, partly in public and partly in private. But the Commission cannot hold public hearings without first consulting the Director of Public Prosecutions. You would not want to compromise any criminal prosecution as a result of a public hearing of the circumstances. The Commission has the powers of the Supreme Court to summon and compel attendance of witnesses, call for the production of documents and evidence, examine witnesses under oath, and to punish witnesses for contempt of court. At the conclusion of the hearing, Madam President, the findings of the Commission and its recommendations must be put forward to the Director of Public Prosecutions. Security forces and public bodies conducting ongoing investigations into any incidents to which the Act would apply shall, at the commencement of the Act, notify the Commission of such investigations, and the Commission shall take over that investigation according to the provisions of the Act. So if there is an ongoing investigation at the time this Act be put in force, that investigation shall be turned over to the Commission. The Commission is required to submit annual reports to the Parliament on the execution of its functions for the preceding year, but such reports shall not contain a record of evidence adduced before the Commission or the particulars of the recommendation made to the Director of Public Prosecutions unless those particular matters are disposed of by the Commission. Again, you do not want to compromise the integrity of any investigation and subsequent criminal prosecution. A register of every investigation completed is to be kept by the Commission and shall contain the particulars of the subject matter, the date of the complaint, the Commission's decisions and recommendations, and disposition of the complaint. So there's always a register in place to ensure full transparency and historical significance. Madam President, this is a comprehensive piece of legislation that ensures that investigations into designated criminal offenses by our security forces or our specified officials are conducted with the necessary independence and expertise that is required. The intent is to ensure that these investigations are no longer viewed, rightfully or wrongfully, but they are viewed as institutions conducting investigations on themselves, and ensures the level of expertise and qualifications that are necessary for such serious matters that are contained in the legislation. Madam President, the companion legislation in today's debate is the Protected Disclosures Bill 2025. An important component of anti-corruption strategy is establishing and providing for an effective protected disclosure regime in the Bahamas. Whistleblower or protected disclosure regimes are considered critical to the fight for transparency and the enhancement of government and corporate accountability. This bill is a product of extensive international benchmarks and input from international agencies. We reviewed several jurisdictions in the Caribbean which have enacted laws and legal measures to provide for the protection of whistleblowers. This includes Guyana, Jamaica, Turks and Caicos, among others. Those three have been identified as regimes that are effective, work well, and provide the necessary protections. We also had support from the International Development Law Organization, otherwise known as the IDLO, in assessing what the best practices are internationally, and their input helped guide us in putting together this piece of legislation. This is a significant piece of legislation with respect to good governance in the Bahamas. The Protected Disclosures Bill is intended to combat wrongdoing by facilitating and making of disclosures and subsequent protection of the persons who are disclosing that wrongdoing. There needs to be legal protection. The bill applies to both public servants and private citizens who report in good faith any wrongdoing by their employers. Wrongdoing is comprehensively defined in the legislation as, 1, the commission of a criminal offense by an employer, conduct that threatens damages to the environment, conduct that threatens the health and safety of any person, conduct that shows gross mismanagement and maladministration of the use of public funds or the financial resources of the employer, corruption or dishonesty in relation to the use of any public funds or financial resources of an employer, acts of reprisal against victimization of an employee, willful concealment of any of the above-mentioned activities. All of those are protected subject matters when there is a complainant. The protected disclosure framework is intended to be managed by an existing authority with sufficient independence to receive disclosures, handle investigations, do it impartially, and monitor compliance with the bill. Madam President, it is the intent of the government to designate the Independent Commission of Investigations as the said authority for the oversight of this piece of legislation. Under the bill, employees will be able to disclose allegations of wrongdoing in relation to their employee or employer or another employee. The definition of employee is broad, which is important. It's broad and covers various types of arrangements. Disclosures to the designated authority are made in writing, must be signed by the employee making the disclosure, and disclosures related to national security are made to the designated authority who is empowered to investigate the disclosure and then notify the Prime Minister and the Minister of National Security. So any matters of national security significance elevate automatically to the Prime Minister and the Minister of National Security. Upon receipt of a disclosure, the designated authority is required to evaluate the disclosure and institute an investigation into the wrongdoing. The designated authority has been given wide powers to request documents, reports of information regarding the allegation, deploy investigators where the circumstances require further evidence, and hold hearings in consultation with the Attorney General to make a determination on the matter. Once an investigation is complete, the designated authority is required to produce and share its report and recommendations and its findings with the Attorney General for dissemination to the person or organization with responsibility for the employer or whom the disclosure was made. Where the report of the designated authority contains information which indicates a criminal offense might have been committed, the information is then forwarded on again to the Director of Public Prosecutions to determine if charges should be brought. Upon receiving a report by the Attorney General, the person or organization with responsibility for the employer of whom the disclosure is required to, one, make recommendations regarding the measures to be taken to correct the wrongdoing, take steps to remedy the wrongdoing, provide redress where appropriate, and take disciplinary action where appropriate, and reduce the opportunity for the reoccurrence of the action. And it is their requirement to ensure that the rights of the employee making the disclosure or any witness or person are protected. See, Madam President, a key component of this legislation and this protected disclosure regime are strong protections for the employees who disclose the wrongdoing. That is the underlying purpose of this. The legal framework provides safeguards against retaliation, which includes disciplinary action, dismissal, harassment, or other adverse action related to the employment. So all of those are protected. If any of that occurs, the employer is in violation of the law. A person who makes a disclosure is protected, the person actually making the disclosure, the whistleblower himself or herself, are protected from civil, criminal, or disciplinary proceedings that are related to that disclosure. Further, the identity of the employees making the disclosures are required to be kept confidential. Employees who come forth and disclose wrongdoing are protected from occupational detriment due to their disclosure. That's important. Occupational detriment may include disciplinary action, dismissal, harassment, a refusal of a transfer or promotion. All of that are protected. Protection against the commencement of proceedings by employers who claim breach of contract for disclosing wrongdoing are also extended to employees, ensuring that the protections survive for those also under contract rather than regarded as permanent employees. So it's much broader. So an employer could not get around this by a function of having their employee under contract rather than deemed to be a permanent employee. Offenses include preventing a person from making a protected disclosure, harassing or intimidating a person who has made a protected disclosure, and being subject to any occupational detriment, as I have discussed just previously. Offenses also include persons who make disclosures that are knowingly false or misleading. So that's important as well. So if you knowingly make a disclosure against your employer because you're mad at them and it's false and it's misleading, then you've committed an offense. There has to be integrity on both sides of this. Madam President, this is an important piece of legislation. This closes the circle on good governance and the anti-corruption strategy of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Madam President, each piece of legislation should be read together to appreciate the breadth of what we have accomplished. The Ombudsman Act addresses maladministration and breaches of human rights within the civil service. Right? The governor of the Bahamas is the largest employer in the country. And to have this independent regime that addresses matters of maladministration within the civil service is fundamental. The Independent Commission of Investigations Bill addresses criminal matters or complaints against our security forces and for designated senior government officials and the political directorate. The bill provides for the independence in investigating, again, and if criminal activity is found, independence in prosecution through the DPP. And the Protected Disclosures Bill takes a wider approach. So just think about the scales of which we are doing. We have managed matters within the civil service. We have managed criminal matters, again, conducted by security forces and designated officials. And now with the Protected Disclosures Bill, we take a wider approach and provide protection and a mechanism for investigating your employer and the employer-employee relationship, ensuring that there is a regime for complaints, protecting the complainer, and ensuring that there is adequate investigation and prosecution when there is criminal activity. I again make the point, Madam President, it's a very important point. I again make the point. Under this PLP government, this is the most extensive and comprehensive suite of legislation for ensuring good governance and protection against corruption in this country. Madam President, before I close, I want to address an issue that seems to be discussed and keep coming up around this framework of our anti-corruption and good governance strategy. And that is with respect to the Integrity Commission. We have heard the leader of the opposition and others speak about the need for an Integrity Commission, even after this legislation, even in the House of Assembly. And making the point that because we don't have, quote unquote, an Integrity Commission, we aren't going far enough. I would encourage those who are making these comments, which would include the leader of the opposition, to please just take some time and read the legislation. Just take some time. See, in some Caribbean jurisdictions, Madam President, you will see an independent commission that investigates security forces, and you would also find an integrity commission that investigates the other government officials and political directorate. Right? You'll see two separate commissions, right? We took a different approach. We took the approach that we would implement the equivalent scope. So we have the security forces and senior government officials and the political directorate. The equivalent scope. However, we thought, and based upon our research and speaking to colleagues throughout the region who have both independent commissions, we thought it more efficient and we thought it more effective that one commission performs these functions rather than two. If you look at the content of the Independent Commission of Investigations bill and the list of government officials that it covers, our bill accomplishes the same thing, if not more, than an integrity commission without the duplication of cost and the effort of having two separate commissions for such a small country, Madam President. We believe the bill is fit for purpose, with one commission covering the scope of both of Integrity Commission and the commissions that deal with security forces. Madam President, what makes this more interesting, colleagues, what makes this more interesting, especially on the commentary we hear, and I expect we will hear from the opposition, is that in 2017, I think that was the first year of your administration, right, Senator? 2017, the prior administration put forward an Integrity Commission bill. Their first year. For their entire administration, Madam President, they did nothing. Nothing with the bill. They told the Bahamian people, Madam President, I'm going to quote what they told the Bahamian people. They told the Bahamian people that, I quote, the new bill is part of the Minnis administration's proposed anti-corruption legislation and follows up on the promise contained in the May 2017 speech from the throne that the government will enact and enforce anti-corruption legislation for all parliamentarians and public officials. That was their promise, and that was their declaration when they tabled the bill in 2017. During their entire administration, one which the leader of the opposition, and the leader in here in the Senate for the opposition were members of the cabinet that approved the bill, put it forward, tabled it in the House of Assembly, approved the speech from the throne, promised it to all of the Bahamian people. The leader of the opposition was in the cabinet, and the leader of opposition business in the Senate were both in the cabinet when they put this forward. They did nothing except give lip service. As a part of the anti-corruption strategy and promise to the Bahamian people, they likewise, listen to this, they likewise promised the Ombudsman bill. Again, that was only lip service, because it was this PLP administration that put forward the Ombudsman bill, got it passed, and are implementing it right now. So, Madam President, I challenge the Bahamian public. When it comes to the Free National Movement, the current opposition, history is the ultimate truth teller. History. They talked about anti-corruption legislation. They promised it. They even tabled it. But they didn't go forward with it. Madam President, I don't know. All I know is this, Madam President. It took a PLP administration, a progressive liberal party, New Day government, Madam President, under Philip B. Brave Davis, to move forward with the most comprehensive and aggressive suite of legislation for good governance and the prevention of corruption that this great country has ever seen, Madam President. That's the facts. History will be the ultimate truth teller. History will be the ultimate truth teller. With that, Madam President, I move for the second reading of the Independent Commission of Investigations Bill 2025 and the Protected Disclosures Bill of 2025. I so move.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder, for your contribution. Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable J.Ann Major.
Madam President, it is a pleasure to rise and offer my contribution to a compendium of bills which outlines this administration's commitment to combating corruption, improving transparency, and enhancing public trust in the country's institutions. I wish to extend my welcome to the guests who are in the gallery with us today. We're looking at the future of Bahamian politics. And I must say that I am proud to see that all is not lost on our young people and that we still have young people who are willing to stand up for country. Madam President, turning now to the bills, I wish to first start off by commending the Honorable Prime Minister Davis and this administration for doing a tremendous job in bringing forth vital and long overdue legislative reform for the betterment of this country and to improve the lives of everyday Bahamians. This administration is not only delivering on its promises, but it has shown that it is committed to also tackling the new challenges head-on as they arise. Last year, as the AG would have mentioned, we enacted the Ombudsman Act of 2024, which, as we all know, established the Office of the Ombudsman as an independent body to investigate complaints against government agencies, departments, and officials regarding maladministration, unfair treatment, or abuse of power, and also ensuring the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms of the citizens of this country. Now, with the Independent Commission of Investigations Bill 2025 and the Protected Disclosures Bill of 2025, we continue to take substantial steps towards strengthening oversight, accountability, and integrity within the Bahamas. Far too often, Madam President, we've heard the cries of the Bahamian people regarding the abuse of power by some members of our armed forces, and a lack of confidence that the bad apples would ever be held accountable for wrongdoing. Madam President, many of us have heard the cries of Bahamians who do not believe that the police can truly police themselves, or who also believe that there are different rules for different members of society, different rules for the haves and the have-nots, and different rules and different opportunities based on who you know. Madam President, with these bills, we are leveling that playing field to ensure that no one gets a pass to abuse their power and that Bahamians can start to feel encouraged to report wrongdoing in both the public and the private sectors because they know that it will not be used against them and that the offenders will be held accountable. As we have heard, the Independent Commission of Investigations Bill of 2025 establishes the Independent Commission of Investigations, which is an autonomous body tasked with investigating breaches of criminal law and allegations of misconduct by members of the security forces, which would include the police force, the defense force, the Department of Corrections, and the Department of Immigration, as well as members who are classed as specified public officials. This would include members of Parliament, permanent secretaries, senior government officials, registrars, family island administrators. As the AG would have said, the list was widened after consultation to ensure that no one is exempt. This bill also brings the Bahamas in line with best international practices for independent investigations into public sector misconduct. The offenses which will fall under the Commission's purview include murder or manslaughter, excluding those deaths in custody, which would fall under the coroner's jurisdiction, armed robbery and other violent crimes, obstruction and perversions of justice, bribery, drug trafficking and human trafficking, abuse of constitutional rights which result in death or grievous harm, as well as gang-related activities. The commission, as we've heard, will comprise 3 commissioners appointed by the Governor General based on the Prime Minister's recommendation after consulting with the leader of the opposition, and they will have the power to receive complaints from the public. And to be clear, members of the security forces and specified officials who in the course of their duty or employment becomes aware of or involved in any of the offenses under the Act are also free to make a complaint with the Commission or the Director of Complaints appointed under the legislation. The commission also has the power to conduct investigations and summon and examine witnesses under oath. They have the power to conduct hearings, to assess evidence, and determine the validity of complaints, provided, of course, that they consult with the Director of Public Prosecutions. They also have the power, the commission also has the power to determine whether criminal charges should be recommended to the Director of Public Prosecutions, and where such recommendation is made and the Director of Public Prosecutions agrees that a concerned party should be prosecuted for a criminal offense, then they will institute and undertake criminal proceedings against that party. Madam President, to ensure transparency, the Commission is also required to issue annual reports to Parliament and the public on the execution of its functions. To ensure impartiality, the Commission will operate independently and would not be subject to the direction or control of any external person or authority or political influence. With the Commission of Investigations Bill, investigations of misconduct within these organizations will no longer be handled internally, reducing the risk of cover-ups and conflicts of interest. Commissioners are afforded immunity for all actions performed in their official capacity, and all documents and information obtained during investigations are treated as secret and confidential. Immunity is also afforded to witnesses and persons assisting the Commission in its investigations. Madam President, this brings me now to the Protected Disclosures Bill of 2025. This bill strongly complements the Independent Commission of Investigations Bill of 2025 by providing a clear framework for reporting misconduct across public and private sectors, by providing robust protections for whistleblowers, safeguarding them from retaliation and legal repercussions, thereby fostering a culture of transparency and integrity and an environment conducive to good ethical conduct. Without the whistleblower protections, corruption and abuses of power continue to go unchecked because individuals fear the consequences of speaking up. How many times have you heard of instances where someone is forced to sit quiet in the face of blatant misconduct in their place of employment because they fear that speaking up would result in them either losing their job or being victimized and overlooked for rightfully earned career advancement? Under the Protected Disclosures Bill, an employee who has a reasonable belief that his or her employer or another employee has committed or is committing a wrongdoing may make a disclosure to the designated authority. Employees who make protected disclosures are protected and shielded from retaliation, including dismissal, demotion, or any other unfair treatment. Their identity is also kept confidential during the investigation process, and they are also afforded immunity from civil and criminal liability, provided, of course, that the protected disclosure was made in good faith and based on a reasonable belief that the information is true. A disclosure qualifies as a protected disclosure where it is made in accordance with the Public Disclosures Act. The disclosure is made by an employee who had a reasonable belief that based on the information available to the employee at the time, that the information disclosed is substantially true and correct. The disclosure was made in good faith. The information disclosed was not obtained in the course of obtaining legal advice, and the information disclosed shows that the person against whom the disclosure is made or is being committed has committed a wrongdoing. As outlined by the Attorney General, the wrongdoing is also defined by the Act, so I won't reiterate them here. As with the Commission, the designated authority is also required to file reports on the execution of their duties. Madam President, we are living in an era of social media where bad news travels faster than ever, and we can no longer turn a blind eye to the fact that with recent criminal allegations levied against several members of our uniformed branches, many Bahamians have not only lost faith in our police force, but many are not confident that things will ever change. But I say this, Madam President, if there's one way to guarantee that things will never change, it would be to sit back and do nothing. Allow the status quo to remain, and that is not what this administration is about. Madam President, many would recall that when the news first broke on the criminal allegations made by the United States against several Bahamian citizens, the former Prime Minister Hubert Minnis would have revealed or bragged, if you will, that he was informed of a pending indictment from 2020. And while he did stress that his government was anti-corruption, we must ask ourselves what was done at that time to address the issue. I remind the Bahamian people, as the AG has done, that despite promises to enact anti-corruption legislation, they failed to do so during their tenure. Prime Minister Davis, on the other hand, from the outset has spoken out and outlined this administration's clear stance against corruption and its commitment to weeding out the bad apples by confronting and dismantling the criminal enterprises that have infiltrated our law enforcement agencies. He immediately engaged in consultations with international partners and domestic law enforcement leadership to comprehensively address the situation, reaffirming this administration's full cooperation in uncovering the truth and dismantling these criminal networks. Madam President, with these bills, this administration is taking decisive action and establishing a fundamental shift in how we tackle corruption within our law enforcement and government agencies, and they strengthen the accountability of those who have been entrusted with serving, protecting, and acting in the best interest of the Bahamian people. Allegations of corruption have eroded public confidence, and for too long, misconduct has gone unchecked and unpunished to the point where many believe that they are untouchable. All of that ends now. This is not the time for petty politics. It is the time for action. These bills are the most significant anti-corruption reforms in modern Bahamian history. And to oppose just for opposing's sake is to do a grave injustice to the Bahamian people. You either support a system where those in power can operate without consequences, or you don't. You either believe in a system that stands for accountability, transparency, justice, and fairness, or you don't. This administration stands on the side of the Bahamian people. This administration stands on the side of restoring the public's confidence in our institutions. This administration stands on the side of delivering real solutions to this country's problems. Madam President, I stand to second and give my full support of these bills and the continued work that this administration is doing to combat corruption. I pray God's continued blessings on this administration, the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, and the Commonwealth of the Bahamas at large. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Honorable J. Ann Major, for your contribution. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to combat wrongdoing in the public and private sectors by encouraging, facilitating, and protecting disclosures made to an authority designated for the purposes of investigating and determining wrongdoing and for connected purposes. As many, the chair recognizes Senator Honorable Michaela Barnett Ellis.
It's me again. Madam President, I'd like to welcome the senators from our Youth in Parliament program. Through you, Madam President, I'd like to say to them that their interest in our civic duties is commendable, and it is important that the voice of our young adults are heard in these parliamentary chambers as often as possible. Their voices are critical to our development. We are merely trustees, and they are the beneficiaries of a future Bahamas. Madam President, your dedication to mentorship remains strong, and I know that you will mentor this new cohort, and I look forward to bearing witness to their first session at this honorable table. And now on to the Bahamas is Not a Real Place news. There's a radio show that I like, and it has a segment called The Bahamas is Not a Real Place News. And in that segment, they talk about the wild and surreal things that happen in our great Bahama land. Madam President, I think continuing to shoot someone as a young child runs to his body is diabolical. What monsters roam our streets that they would continue shooting while a child was in the line of fire? And unfortunately, this isn't the first time that this has happened. In recent times, we've had the murder of a man while holding his daughter, and an early morning murder of a man in the presence of his daughter outside of a shopping plaza. Madam President, if we were to define the worst of the worst, I submit that committing murder in the immediate presence of a child would be part of that definition. Mark chapter 9, verse 42 comes to mind, King James Version. And whosoever shall offend one of these little ones that believes in me. But they like to say, us Catholics, that we don't know our Bible. Madam President, research shows that children exposed to trauma, such as witnessing a violent act, often have difficulty processing what they have seen, which can manifest itself in behavioral issues and difficulties at school. Over time, these experiences can alter their ability to feel safe as they are haunted by the memories of the event. Her innocence has been fractured, and a millstone ought to be placed around their necks. The fear of crime remains high, especially as it extends beyond dark alleys to broad daylight with no regard for those nearby. Our security forces, the police, the defense force, immigration officers, customs officers, and prison officers are on the front line of that fight. And that is why it is imperative that we restore the trust in these institutions by demonstrating that there is an independent process to investigate and deal with the inevitable bad apples. Restoring confidence and trust in senior public officials and law enforcement is crucial for maintaining a healthy democracy, social stability, and effective governance. A key component of this process is establishing a transparent and accountable complaint system that includes strong protections for complaints and witnesses. The Independent Commission of Investigations Bill seeks to create an independent body which investigates complaints made against members of the security forces and senior public officials. It can generate its own investigation, and when it becomes aware of the occurrence of an incident that erodes public confidence, it can investigate. I hope this bill is enacted forthwith, and its commissioners and employees are appointed before the ink is dry, so that they can investigate the matters which prompted the tabling of this legislation. This administration likes to pass plenty legislation, and then it drags its feet. In fact, the Ombuds Bill was passed in February of last year, but I am glad that more than a year later, they're finally getting around to enacting it. The Mental Health Act 2022 took almost 2 years to come into force. The Fiscal Responsibility Council, which was appointed in October 2024, 15 months after the implementation of the act. But I suppose that tells us how important fiscal responsibility is to them. Public officials and law enforcement agencies are expected to uphold integrity, fairness, and justice. However, when misconduct occurs and it is not addressed transparently, public confidence erodes. And we, the public, know that something is amiss. Guns are imported into our country. We don't produce them here. Scores of undocumented persons remain at large. Persons accused of crimes are walking free. These are matters which our security forces are supposed to combat, but we know that there are bad apples. Perhaps more importantly, though, we know that there are no secrets in this community of ours. Someone knows something about persons charged with enforcing the laws of this country, upholding the laws of this country, but that they are deliberately failing to do so. So often there are calls to see something, say something. But particularly when the accused persons are in authority, persons with power, we need to ensure that people who have the courage to come forward and say something are afforded all the protections under the law. As these bills are drafted, those coming forward to make a complaint on a member of our security forces or a member of the government, elected or otherwise, isn't afforded the same comprehensive protections contained in the Protected Disclosure Bill. Why is that? We aren't naive as to how victimization goes in this country. We know people abuse power, particularly when they are at risk. The Independent Commission of Investigations Bill contains a provision that the Commission may make recommendations to the Minister for the review and amendment of any laws and procedures for the protection of complainants. But we must ask, why wait for that recommendation to be made for the Minister to act? We know bureaucracy takes long. The Protected Disclosure Bill is already drafted legislation containing comprehensive powers that protects persons that make complaints. And while I suspect that it was drafted after the Independent Commission legislation was hastily tabled, it would have made sense to amend the Independent Commission bill to incorporate the provisions of the Protected Disclosure Bill, or, even easier, remove the subsection of the Protected Disclosures Bill that says that it does not apply to complaints made against security officers and senior government officials. Madam President, my question is why? Why is this administration refusing to give people who complain about security forces and senior government officials the absolute protection from reprisal? It is almost if they want to retain the threat of reprisals. Can you imagine? A person who makes a complaint about the financial secretary or a cabinet minister will not be granted the protection from being harassed, intimidated, or victimized, from being transferred against their will, from being unfairly refused a transfer or promotion, yes, from being penalized by a change in terms of their employment or retirement, or from being given an adverse reference, from being denied access to training, or from being fired, because those are the protections not afforded in the Investigation Commission bill. A well-functioning complaint system will reassure the public that accountability mechanisms exist, that misconduct will not be tolerated. Legal protections for complaints and witnesses and non-retaliation laws encourages more people to come forward. Many individuals hesitate to report corruption, abuse of power, or unethical behavior due to the fear of retaliation. A complaint system which operates openly with clear procedures and public reporting on outcomes prevents cover-ups and ensures that cases are handled fairly. Independent oversight bodies should be involved to review complaints and ensure impartial investigations, reducing the risk of internal bias or corruption. When officials and law enforcement officers know that they will be held accountable through a transparent process, it strengthens the culture of ethical behavior. A transparent complaint system with strong protections helps deter wrongdoing by making it clear that misconduct has its consequences. This can reduce the incidence of bribery, discrimination, excessive force, and other forms of abuse. For law enforcement in particular, trust is essential for effective policing. If people believe that complaints are taken seriously and that they will be safe from retaliation, they are more likely to cooperate with police investigations and community safety initiatives. This improves public safety and strengthens relationships between officers and the communities that they serve. Our democracy requires that all individuals, regardless of status or position, are subject to the same rules. A transparent complaint system ensures that justice is served fairly, whether the accused is a senior public official or an entry-level employee. Restoring trust in public officials and law enforcement requires a commitment to accountability, transparency, and the protection of those who expose wrongdoing. The failure to provide absolute protections across the board undermines this administration's alleged commitment to good governance, accountability, and transparency. I encourage the Honorable Attorney General to pause. Let's make an amendment to provide the same protections to all complainants. We are all charged with the constitutional duty to make the laws for good government and peace of the Bahamas. And with that, Madam President, I rest, and may God continue to bless this beautiful land.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Michael Ellis, for your contribution. Senator, before we proceed, Senator
Just a
Ryan.
point of order.
Sure.
Just
What
a
is
point
the
of order.
nature of your
to
point of order?
clarify
Yes.
a misconception that my good friend and colleague on the other side spent 3/4 of her communication speaking about. I would first ask the public to look at sections 13.3, which provides for the protection of those making a disclosure, both under confidentiality matters as well as with respect to the employment. So there is protection in this bill to address exactly what the good senator was trying to point out. I also would point out that the Independent Commission of Investigations bill's scope is different than the protected disclosure scope. I mean, this isn't something that they just, with the good senator parroting what she had heard in the other place as her contribution, that this was looked at, and there's a difference in scope. The protected disclosures bill, Madam President, addresses matters that are deemed either criminal or not criminal, right? Or not criminal. They don't have to rise to criminality to rise under the Protected Disclosures Act. Under the Independent Commission of Investigations bill, the entire purpose and intent is to address matters of criminality. Because they are different in scope, they are different in application as well. And so the good senator should know, we did look at the issue. We concluded that there was adequate protection in the Independent Commission of Investigations bill, and that there's no further amendment needed.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to direct the Honorable Attorney General, my colleague and friend, to Section 13 and to what it actually says. Because the part of the section that refers to protection from breach of contract is subsection 3, and that solely relates to persons under subsection 2 who make a complaint. That refers to persons who are public officers or officers of the security force. In other words, if a police officer or member of the security forces makes a complaint, they will be protected from breach of contract and all of the other things that the Attorney General mentions. But those provisions do not apply to a member of the public who makes a complaint. They are under Section 1. So I encourage the Attorney General to have a reread of this section and look at how it is actually applied.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Michael Bonnet Ellis. As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Tyrell Yao.
Thank you much. Good morning, Madam President. Is that? Oh, sorry, my apologies. Good afternoon, Madam President. It's been a long morning. Madam President, esteemed colleagues, and the people of the Bahamas, I rise today with great conviction and unwavering support for two critical pieces of legislation that will shape the future of governance and accountability in our beloved nation. The Integrity Commission Bill 2017 and the Protected Disclosures Bill 2025. Madam President, I beg leave for just a moment to give condolences to a great man. I was deeply saddened to hear of the passing of George Constantakis, a truly exceptional individual who was not only a well-respected businessman, but also a cherished member of the Long Island community. Please accept my heartfelt condolences during this incredibly difficult time. George's contributions to the business world and to his community were immeasurable. His legacy of dedication, integrity, and leadership will continue to inspire many for years to come. He was a pillar of strength in the Long Island community, Madam President, and his influence was felt by all who knew him. His passing leaves a void that will be deeply felt, but his memory and impact will forever remain in the hearts of those whose lives he touched. Please know that my thoughts and prayers are with you and your family during this time of grief. Madam President, these bills are not just laws. They represent a commitment to transparency, ethical governance, and the fight against corruption. For too long, the Bahamian people have called for greater accountability from their leaders. We have seen how unethical practices, favoritism, and mismanagement of public resources have eroded public trust in government institutions. We have also seen, however, how whistleblowers, courageous individuals who seek to expose wrongdoing, are often left vulnerable to retaliation. And Madam President, today, with these two bills, we take a decisive step towards reforming our institutions, strengthening our democracy, and protecting those who dare to stand up for justice. This is not a partisan issue. This is a matter of national importance. The fight against corruption transcends political affiliations, and we must rise above division to do what is right for our people. The Integrity Commission Bill 2017, strengthening accountability. Establishment of the Integrity Commission Bill. This bill creates an independent integrity commission, a corporate body responsible for investigating corruption, enforcing financial disclosures, and promoting transparency. This commission will not be symbolic. It will have the power to summon witnesses, conduct inquiries, and recommend legal action against those who betray the public trust. The commission will also monitor legislative and administrative practices to ensure the loopholes that enable corruption are identified and addressed. This is critical because corruption often thrives in the shadows, where systems are weak and oversight is absent. By proactively identifying vulnerabilities in governance, this commission will ensure that we are always one step ahead in the fight against corruption. Madam President, mandatory financial disclosure. Public officials will be required to disclose their income, assets, and liabilities annually. This bill mandates the disclosure of gifts to prevent bribery and undue influences. The Commission will have authority to audit declarations and request further particulars, strengthening its oversight. Any official found to have deliberately misrepresented their financial status will be subject to investigation and possible prosecution. Criminalizing corruption. This bill outlines specific acts of corruption, such as bribery, abuse of power, and fraudulent procurement. Severe penalties are established, including fines up to $20,000, imprisonment up to 5 years, and disqualification from public office for 5 years. It introduces a presumption of corruption where a public office official wealth significantly exceeds their known sources of income. Furthermore, Madam President, the bill empowers law enforcement agencies to collaborate with international corruption bodies, ensuring that corrupt officials cannot simply hide illicit gains offshore. Whistleblowers protection and code of conduct. The bill provides strong protection for whistleblowers, shielding them from job loss, harassment, or retaliation. It establishes a binding code of conduct to ensure public officials uphold ethical behavior. It introduces sanctions for ethical breaches, ensuring that violations do not go unnoticed or unpunished. The Protected Disclosures Bill 2025, empowering whistleblowers. Madam President, one of the greatest barriers to transparency is fear. Fear of retaliation, fear of losing employment, and fear of being labeled as a troublemaker. The Protected Disclosure Bill 2025 eliminates this fear by providing a legal framework that guarantees confidentiality, that guarantees protection, and a fair investigative process. The key objectives of this bill, Madam President, to name a few: one, encouraging the reporting of wrongdoing in both the public and private sectors. Two, establishing a structured framework for handling disclosures and investigations. Three, protecting whistleblowers from retaliation, including termination, demotion, and harassment. Four, promoting a culture of transparency and accountability in workplaces. Deterring misconduct by ensuring the unethical behavior does not go unpunished. Types of reportable wrongdoing: criminal offenses committed by an employer or employee, threats of public health and safety, gross mismanagement of resources, corruption in public and private sectors, acts of retaliation against whistleblowers. Ensuring confidentiality and oversight, Madam President. The bill guarantees that the identity of whistleblowers will remain protected. It establishes a designated authority responsible for receiving, investigating, and addressing disclosures. Employers who retaliate against whistleblowers will face strict penalties. Additionally, whistleblowers who suffer retaliation will have legal resources and compensation mechanisms in place to restore their livelihoods. Madam President, these bills are complementary in their mission. While the Integrity Commission Bill 2017 creates a strong regulatory body to investigate and prevent corruption, the Protected Disclosures Bill 2025 empowers individuals to come forward without fear. Together, they provide a powerful safeguard against misconduct, ensuring that both institutions and individuals are held to the highest standards of integrity. When corruption thrives, it is the people who suffer, Madam President. Our hospitals remain underfunded. Our schools lack of resources. Our infrastructure crumbles. But when transparency and accountability prevails, our nation prospers. With these bills, we are also sending a message to the international community that the Bahamas is a country that upholds democratic principles, protects human rights, and values ethical leadership. This will enhance our global reputation, attract responsible foreign investment, and strengthen our economy. The passage of these bills is not about political advantage. It is about doing what is right for the Bahamian people. It is about proving that public service is a sacred trust, not an opportunity for enrichment. I urge my colleagues to stand together in support of these critical reforms. Let this day be remembered as the day we chose integrity over corruption, transparency over secrecy, and accountability over complacency. The people of the Bahamas deserves nothing less, Madam President. And Madam President, I thank you. I thank the Prime Minister of our Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Mr. Philip Brave Davis, and may integrity always guide our path forward. I support this bill.
Thank you, Senator Honorable Tyrell Young, for your contribution. You wanna go straight through it? No? Okay, Russell is on. Young, opposition. We're gonna break. We're gonna break. Yeah. No, I have enough, so yeah. Russell?
Speak, please. You can speak, please. Speak into it.
The chair recognizes Senator Honorable Kirkland Russell.
Thank you.
Senator Russell. The chair recognizes Senator Honorable Michael Halkitis.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the business of the Senate do now suspend until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
Is there a seconder? Second. It has been moved and seconded that the business of the Senate is hereby suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon. It's officially confirmed that the business of the Senate is suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The business of the Senate is suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.